Surprisingly, over 90% of viewers haven't subscribed yet. If you're enjoying the content, hit that subscribe button. It motivates us to keep creating and helps us never miss an upload, and I never thought I'd be the kind of man telling this story. For years, I believed my life was simple, ordinary, and maybe even blessed. I had a wife I loved, 2 children who looked up to me, and a home that I worked like a mule to keep afloat. 70-hour weeks weren't easy, but I didn't complain. Every overtime shift, every missed holiday, every late night crawling into bed after everyone else was asleep, I told myself it was worth it. I was sacrificing so my family could have stability, so my children wouldn't have to know the struggles I grew up with. I thought she understood that. I thought she appreciated it. But the truth was being woven behind my back like a poisonous thread. And the worst part wasn't even the betrayal itself, it was how my children were dragged into it, how they were made to cover for what should have been unthinkable. It started small. My daughter, who was usually so bubbly, began to act withdrawn. My son, too young to hide his feelings well, seemed tense whenever I mentioned their mother. I'd come home exhausted, ready to collapse into bed, and sometimes I'd hear them whispering in hushed tones down the hallway. I told myself kids have secrets, little things they don't want their parents to know. But there was something different in their eyes when they looked at me. Something almost like pity. The first real crack came one Saturday morning. I had managed to take the day off, something rare, and surprised everyone by making pancakes in the kitchen. The kids loved it, and I thought my wife would be happy too. But instead of joining us, she seemed irritated, like my being home had disrupted some schedule I wasn't aware of. I brushed it off at first, telling myself she was tired. But then I noticed the look she gave when her phone buzzed. A sharp glance, a too quick swipe to hide the screen. I didn't say anything then. I didn't want to believe what my gut was whispering. But guts are rarely wrong. The evidence piled up in ways I couldn't ignore. Too many errands that lasted longer than they should. Clothes carefully chosen on days when she claimed she was just staying home. And always, the shift in our children's demeanor, as though they were carrying the weight of a secret too heavy for their little shoulders. I tried to dismiss it. I told myself I was paranoid, tired from work, imagining things. But the truth has a way of clawing its way to the surface. One evening I came home earlier than expected. My shift had been cut short, and I thought I'd surprise everyone with takeout from their favorite place. I parked quietly, carrying the bags, and as I walked up the steps, I heard laughter from inside. At first my heart lifted. It was rare to come home to such joy. But when I opened the door, the laughter stopped too abruptly. My kids were sitting on the couch, their faces pale. My wife wasn't in sight. "Where's Mom?" I asked, setting the food down. They hesitated, glancing at each other in panic. My daughter, older and braver, finally spoke. She's upstairs." Her voice cracked in a way that made my chest tighten. I climbed the stairs, each step heavier than the last. The bedroom door, our bedroom door, was cracked open and I could hear the low murmur of voices inside. I froze for a moment, my mind screaming at me not to look, not to confirm the fear coiled in my stomach. But I pushed the door open anyway. What I saw stopped my heart cold. There they were, my wife, my older brother. In the bed I had bought, in the room that was supposed to be our sanctuary. His hand on her shoulder, her head on his chest, both of them looking up at me with the same expression, caught but not even ashamed. The world tilted. For a moment I couldn't breathe. It felt like the floor had been yanked out from under me. "Dad?" A small voice called from behind me. My son. He had followed me up the stairs, and when he saw what I saw, he gasped. My daughter pulled him back quickly, trying to shield him. But it was too late. He'd seen everything. My wife sat up quickly, her face pale. "It's not what it looks like," she started. But even she couldn't get the words out with conviction. My brother, bold as ever, didn't even look ashamed. He just stared at me with that smug tilt of his chin, as though daring me to do something. My hands trembled at my sides, and for the first time in my life, I felt something inside me crack. All those hours, all those sacrifices, all the trust I had poured into both of them, it meant nothing. But what crushed me more than anything was turning to see my children's faces, twisted in confusion and hurt. They had known. They had been forced to keep this secret from me. The weight they had carried in silence was suddenly clear. My wife and brother hadn't just betrayed me. They had betrayed our children too, turning them into accomplices in their deception. I closed the door without another word. My voice wouldn't work, and I was afraid of what I might do if I stayed. I went downstairs, sat at the table, and stared at the takeout bags I had brought home. The smell of the food made me sick. When my wife came down a few minutes later, she tried to speak, but I raised my hand to silence her. My brother had the decency not to follow, at least not then. The kids hovered at the edge of the kitchen, their eyes wide and scared. My daughter whispered, "I'm sorry, Dad, we didn't want to lie to you." Her words gutted me. I pulled her and her brother close, holding them tight, though my hands still trembled. "It's not your fault," I whispered. "None of this is your fault." But inside, I was shattering. That night I didn't sleep. I lay awake on the couch, staring at the ceiling, listening to the silence in the house that no longer felt like home. My mind replayed every sacrifice. Every moment I thought I was building a life for us, only to realize they had been tearing it apart behind my back. And as dawn crept through the windows, I knew one thing for certain. Nothing would ever be the same again. The following days blurred together like a fog I couldn't escape. I still went to work because I had to. Bills didn't stop piling up just because my world had shattered, but the overtime hours I once wore like a badge of honor now felt like a cruel joke. What was the point of all that sacrifice when the very people I had sacrificed for had been busy tearing me apart behind my back? When I came home, I avoided the bedroom. I slept on the couch, barely speaking to my wife. She tried a few times, weak apologies, excuses, half-hearted pleas, but I shut her out. My brother stopped coming around, at least openly, though I had no doubt they were still in contact. I didn't care enough to check her phone anymore. Seeing the betrayal in the flesh had been more than enough proof. The hardest part was the children. My daughter lingered near me often, like she was afraid I'd vanish too. My son clung to my side whenever I was home, his little hands curling around my arm as if holding me would stop the cracks spreading through our family. I tried to reassure them, but every word caught in my throat. How do you explain to children that the two people they trusted most had turned their love into a weapon? One night, about a week after I'd discovered the truth, I finally broke my silence with my wife. She was in the kitchen, pretending to do dishes, though the sink was already empty. I walked in, leaned against the doorway, and stared at her. "Why him?" I asked, my voice low and rough. She froze, the dish towel in her hand slipping to the counter. "It wasn't. I didn't mean for it to happen." I laughed bitterly. "That's the line you're going with? You didn't mean for it to happen? You didn't mean for it to happen in our bed, while our kids covered for you?" Her face crumpled. "I was lonely. You were always gone. He was here. I slammed my hand against the doorway, and she flinched. "I was gone because I was working for this family, for you, so you wouldn't have to struggle, so the kids wouldn't go without, and you repaid me by crawling into bed with my own brother." Tears welled in her eyes, but they did nothing for me. Once upon a time, her tears had been my undoing. Now they were just another performance. I left her standing there and went to my kids. That night, I sat them down in the living room. I didn't tell them everything, but I told them enough. That I loved them. That what their mother and uncle had done was wrong, and none of it was their fault. That they didn't have to lie for anyone anymore. My daughter cried, and my son clung to me, whispering, "Don't leave us too, Dad." Those words broke me more than the betrayal itself. I hugged them tight and promised I wouldn't abandon them. But promises are complicated. The storm reached its peak when my parents got involved. I hadn't spoken to them in years about serious matters, but word travels fast in families. One evening I came home from work and found them waiting in my living room, sitting stiffly on the couch. My wife had called them, of course. "Son," my father started, his voice heavy with that tone he always used when he thought he was being wise. "We need to talk about this." I crossed my arms. "There's nothing to talk about. She cheated on me with my brother. That's the beginning and the end of it." My mother's eyes glistened as she reached for my hand. "He's your brother. She's the mother of your children. Families survive worse than this. You need to forgive them." Something in me snapped. Forgive them? Forgive the woman who had dismantled my trust? Forgive the brother who had looked me in the eye at family dinners while sneaking around with my wife? Forgive the lies that had forced my children into silence. I stood up so fast, the chair scraped against the floor. No. Don't ask me to forgive them. Don't tell me families survive worse. You have no idea what this has done to me, or to my kids. My father's jaw tightened. Blood is blood. You can't just cut ties over a mistake. A mistake? My voice cracked, raw with fury. This wasn't a mistake. A mistake is forgetting to lock the door or burning dinner. This was a choice. Repeated choices. They chose to betray me. They chose to destroy this family. And now you want me to just smile and pretend it never happened? Silence filled the room. My mother wept quietly. My father shook his head, disappointed in me rather than in the ones who had caused the mess. That was the moment I knew I couldn't stay. Not in that house, not in that town, not anywhere near them. Within a month I had packed up what mattered most, my clothes, a few keepsakes, and the belongings of my children. My wife begged me to stay, alternating between rage and sorrow, but I didn't listen. My brother never showed his face to me again, though I heard through the grapevine that he and my wife were still sneaking around. Fine. Let them have each other. They deserved one another. The hardest goodbye was to my parents, not because I wanted to leave them, but because I realized they had already chosen their side. They weren't standing with me. They were standing with the ones who had torn me apart. I cut them off. I blocked numbers, stopped answering messages, and moved hours away to a town where no one knew my name. It wasn't easy. Starting over rarely is. But the air felt cleaner without the weight of betrayal pressing down on me. For the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe. The kids adjusted slowly. They asked questions at night, whispered worries in the dark, but I reassured them as best I could. We built new routines, small rituals that made us feel like a team again. Saturday morning pancakes, Friday night movies, walks in the park after school. Each moment stitched a little piece of my heart back together. But wounds like mine don't vanish. They fester in quiet ways. Sometimes I'd catch myself staring into the mirror, wondering how my own blood could do that to me. Sometimes I'd wake up in the middle of the night, the ghost of her voice in my ears, telling me she was lonely. Lonely. While I worked 70 hours a week to give her the life she wanted. Those thoughts could have consumed me, but instead they became fuel. Fuel to build a new life. Fuel to show my children what strength really looked like. Fuel to prove to myself that I wasn't defined by the betrayal I had endured. I didn't need revenge in the traditional sense. I didn't need to ruin their lives or drag their names through the mud. Their choices would do that for them. All I had to do was live. Live better. Live stronger. Live free. But as the months turned into a year and the sting dulled into a scar, I knew deep down this story wasn't finished. Because betrayal like that doesn't vanish. It lingers, waiting. And when it came back to my doorstep, because it always does, I was ready. The first year in the new town felt like walking on unfamiliar ground. Every street was unknown, every face a stranger. Yet somehow, it was a relief. No whispers about what had happened. No judgmental stares. No family members reminding me to forgive and forget. Just me, my children, and the possibility of something better. I poured myself into building stability. I worked a reasonable schedule now, 40 hours a week instead of 70. The reduced pay hurt at first, but the time I got back with my kids was worth more than any paycheck. We ate dinner together every night. I learned how to braid my daughter's hair before school. I coached my son's little league team on weekends. It wasn't perfect, nothing ever is, but it was real. For the first time in years, I felt like I was living instead of just surviving. Yet betrayal has a way of echoing even in silence. Sometimes when I was sitting on the porch after the kids were in bed, I'd catch myself wondering if my brother ever felt guilty. If my wife, ex-wife, though the paperwork was still dragging through the courts, ever thought about the home she'd destroyed. I told myself it didn't matter. I told myself they were behind me. But part of me knew life doesn't just cut ties that cleanly. And I was right. One ordinary Saturday morning, about 18 months after I'd left, I got a knock on the door. I wasn't expecting anyone. The kids were in the backyard playing, and I was flipping pancakes. When I opened the door, my heart sank. It was my brother. He looked different. Hollow, thinner, with dark circles under his eyes. For a moment I thought I was imagining things. But then he opened his mouth. "Hey," he muttered, shifting awkwardly. Can we talk? I stared at him, disbelief flooding me. You have some nerve showing up here. He winced but didn't leave. I know. I don't know who else to turn to. I almost laughed. Not to turn to? You turned to my wife just fine when I was working myself to death. His eyes dropped to the porch floor. I messed up. Bad. She's not who I thought she was. Things between us are a nightmare. She's angry all the time. We fight. She blames me for everything. And... He hesitated, then added, I don't think the baby's even mine. The words hung in the air like smoke. I should have felt vindicated, or even amused, but instead I just felt tired. This was the chaos I'd escaped, and here he was, dragging it back to my doorstep. I don't care, I said flatly. Whatever problems you two have, they're yours. You made your choices. You knew what you were doing. He nodded, shame written all over his face. I know. I just thought maybe you could find it in your heart to forgive me. Forgive. That word again. Everyone always came back to it, like it was some magical key to erasing betrayal. But forgiveness isn't about erasing. It's about letting go. And I'd already done that. Not for him, not for her, but for me. I don't hate you, I said finally. But I don't trust you either. And I don't want you in my life, or in my kids' lives. You don't get to come back after tearing us apart and ask me to pretend like nothing happened. His shoulders slumped. He looked like he might argue, but then he just nodded and walked away. I closed the door, feeling the weight of finality settle in my chest. I thought that was the end of it. But a few weeks later, my ex-wife showed up. She looked worse than my brother. Exhausted, worn, bitterness etched into every line of her face. She didn't even bother with small talk. She just launched into her pitch the moment I opened the door. We should try again, she said, her voice rushed, desperate. The kids need both of us. He's useless. He can't provide. But you were always steady. We could fix this. Go back to the way things were. I stared at her in disbelief. Go back? To me working myself to death while you lied to my face? To you sneaking around with my brother in our bed? To our children being forced to cover for you? That's the life you want back? Her lips trembled. It was a mistake. No, I cut her off sharply. It was a choice. Over and over. And now you're living with the consequences. She tried again, reaching for me, but I stepped back. Don't come here again. Don't confuse the kids. They deserve peace. They deserve honesty. They deserve better than what you gave them. For a long moment, she just stood there, tears threatening but not falling. Then she turned and left, her footsteps heavy on the porch steps. When I closed the door this time, I didn't feel tired. I felt free. Because here's the truth I had learned. Revenge doesn't always look like smashing things or shouting until your throat gives out. Sometimes revenge is silence. Sometimes it's distance. Sometimes it's living well while the ones who wronged you collapse under the weight of their own choices. My brother lost me, my wife lost me, and neither of them would ever regain what they'd thrown away. Meanwhile, I built something new. The kids thrived in school. My daughter joined the debate team and started talking about college. My son played baseball with a grin so wide it reminded me of myself before the bitterness crept in. And me? I found friends again. Real friends. People who knew me not as the guy who got cheated on, but just as me. I didn't rush into dating, though there were opportunities. I wasn't looking to replace what I lost. I was learning to appreciate what I still had. One evening, sitting on the porch with my kids beside me, I realized I wasn't hurt anymore. The betrayal had carved me open, but it hadn't destroyed me. If anything, it had shown me the kind of strength I didn't know I had. My wife and brother had thought they were clever, that they'd found something better in each other. But all they found was misery. All I found was freedom. And in that quiet, I finally understood. Sometimes the sweetest revenge is not giving people what they think they want. Sometimes it's walking away and never looking back.